Thank you. Deputy Peadar Tóibín, you have 10 minutes.
And just with regard to political reform, it's interesting to note also that because of the scheduling of this debate over these days, the spokesperson on arts, heritage and the Gaeltacht for Sinn Féin won't get an opportunity to put a question to the Minister for another 4 or 5 weeks. And in a month when the Irish language movement have found their voice and 10,000 people have come to the streets, I, as the spokesperson for the Irish language, will get to put one question in an 8-week period to the relevant minister on the Irish language issue, which is incredible. The programme for government promised a revolution. It promised a political whirlwind, and it spoke, I suppose, of unprecedented national resolve. And if you like, the Fine Gael Labour election campaign of 2011 was festooned with promises of jobs and employment creation. But for the most part, these promises have been empty rhetoric or pat rabbit promises. In the last 3 years, there's been no sense of urgency at all. The type of urgency that you'd expect in the jaws of a severe economic crisis. We've had a plethora of dubious schemes introduced, and if you add those to the level of people who have emigrated, the likelihood, Minister, is that you would have about 20% of the state unemployed. And that's an incredible thing. 80,000 people, Irish people, quitting the state every year for the last 3 years. That's 250,000 citizens emigrating over that period of time. And that means these families, tens of thousands of these families, uprooted from Ireland and placed abroad to an uncertain future. And it means thousands of communities across the state having the most innovative and energetic generation deleted from their midst. And, I believe that this government, your government, Minister, will be known to these families at the very least as the emigration government. Since he came to power, unemployment has crept down from 14.6% to 12.3%, and there's no doubt that emigration has played the largest part of that. And 12.3% is a long way off from 4.5% unemployment. And the figures don't tell the full story. If you look in the Nordic countries, you'll see that about a quarter of the population, the working age population, is not working. In this state, about 6 years ago, about 31% of the working age population was not working. But now that figure is 42%. So 42% of people our age in the working age population in this state are not working. And they're not being recorded either in your figures. If you look at the youth section, now in 2011, Minister Joan Burton stated that in her pathways to work, no one who loses his or her jobs should be allowed to drift with no support into long-term unemployment. 3 years later, the proportion of those aged between 20 and 24 not in employment, education or further training in the state is more than a quarter, and this is higher than nearly every other state in Europe other than Greece. It's actually over twice the level of the OECD states. Almost half of those aged under 25 are already more than 12 months unemployed. And the anemic response to this is a watery youth guarantee, that it hasn't got the necessary investment involved. Long-term unemployment, with all the social ills that it has ballooned over the last number of years and is all above almost all OECD countries, bar Greece. Now, one of my major gripes in the last while is that the indigenous sector of Irish society, the small manufacturing companies and those services that internationally trade, have been completely ignored by the state. And so much effort has gone on to attracting foreign direct investment, which is important and which we do welcome, but not to the cost of indigenous companies. And some of the elements in the programme for government that would have helped those indigenous businesses, such as tackling upward-only rents, were literally forgotten about as soon as the rear ends of the new Fine Gael and Labour ministers touched the leather on their new seats. And they literally acquiesced with the wishes of the vested interests of large landlords, many of them shown to be investors in your previous election campaigns. And the programme for government promised to fix the desert within credit that was facing small businesses. Now, the major element of this has had to be making sure that the credit institutions, the banks themselves, were orientated into delivering credit to small businesses. That never happened, and the government, the Fine Gael and Labour, never exerted the necessary influence to make that happen. And what we've seen then as a result of that is a kind of an ecosystem of state-backed credit providers who did everything but provide credit in actual fact. And, you know, Deputy Cleary mentioned one of those credit provisions. I'll mention another, the microfinance startup fund, €100 million to be put in place. What kind of drawdown do you expect that has? €2 million drawdown from that 100 million that was put in place. The programme for government promised to deliver balanced economic policy. Now, even in the first action plan for jobs created in 2011, you put in a proviso that 50% of foreign direct investment had to go into regions outside of Dublin and Cork. Now, the reality is, Minister, under your government, there has been a collapse in the level of FDI outside of Dublin and Cork. In 2011, it was 27%. The government dropped the objective from the next action plan for jobs. And in the following year, it went down to 23%, and it's still falling. If you live outside of the M50, it is likely that this government has not got you on its radar. Now, the programme for government promised sustainable, inclusive growth, a taxation policy that would, make sure that developments in the building industry would be sustainable. But what we've seen in the last number of months is, again, unsustainable, localised property bubbles developing, which are pushing out families. Speculators are elbowing them out of the way again. And instead we've seen that badly needed funds for enterprise is being sucked into these property bubbles on a local basis to the detriment of the productive sector of society. We were told that the programme of government were going to tackle poverty and prevent attacks on the most vulnerable. But the Labour Party actually oversaw and voted for the destruction of the Sunday premium which supported many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of low-paid and middle-income individuals in this society, many of them actually women. You ended it. They depended upon it.
2 minutes.
The Minister, there was a promise for VAT reform for exporting service companies. That disappeared. There was a promise for to help indigenous suppliers with regards to tackling hello money. That's been forgotten about. The government's practice has actually worsened the experience of small businesses trying to tender for contracts. Ireland currently is a poster boy for all the wrong reasons, because we have a bigger proportion of tenders won to firms outside of the state than any other European state, because the government are rolling up contracts so large that small Irish enterprises can't tender for them. I opened up my comments at the start with the fact that we have an urgent crisis, but we don't have an urgent response to it. And the election programme, the programme for government and the austerity treaty all spoke about and headlined promise of investments. We were told that the land of stimulus and investment was around the corner. All we need to do is trust the government and they will take us there. But there's no urgency. There has been no investment and there's been no stimulus. Any stimulus that has been announced has actually been matched with cuts in the capital investment programme over the last number of years, deleting any opportunity for that stimulus to benefit. The Strategic Investment Bank mutated into the Strategic Investment Fund, which now has the urgency of a sleepy tortoise in this state. One of the government's major jobs initiatives, to create energy efficiency. Your government spoke of 1 million homes being insulated before 2020, has completely disappeared. as has the investment to go into it and the jobs that would have been created by it. What we've been saying, Minister, is that there are ways of creating jobs other than reducing wages and people's jobs pay and conditions. You can reduce the costs, such as the energy costs, the rent costs. You can create business rates that actually reflect the profitability of the business. You can make sure that the interaction between the business and the state, the costs are not involved in that.
Thank you.
And you can also invest. You can develop an investment commensurate with the level of urgency that is there. And our party has identified the sources of those funds. And we would urge the Minister to use the 2 years remaining, if you have that length of time, to put in place some of those issues.
Thank you, Deputy Tóibín.